Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure, is sponsored by SJ&L General Contractors. They are licensed in both Alabama and Tennessee, and they provide services such as mass grading, storm drainage, sewer and concrete improvement, asphalt paving, erosion control, demolition, and heavy hauling. If you need any of these services, contact them 931-433-4660, 931-433-4660. Also, they are in need of heavy equipment operators, concrete finishers, CDL dump truck drivers, and pipe layers. If you're interested in employment with this family-owned business, you can go to the website www.sjnl.com. That's www.sjnl.com. Someone moved my lunch. Not in the someone moved my cheese vein, which is probably a delightful little book, but my only experience with it was in an Orwellian attempt of a misguided middle school administrator to use soft tyranny and doublespeak to convince her staff that it was okay to live in an environment of education without accountability or discipline. But I digress. No, someone actually moved my lunch, not my physical lunch, but the time that I ate lunch. See, I've been eating lunch around 11 o'clock up until the year that I entered the ninth grade. And in the ninth grade, my lunch got moved. I didn't get to eat lunch till 11:30. And I remember sitting in the middle of that time change in a class when I should have been in the lunchroom eating my cheese sandwich, my small bag of potato chips, and a slice of my mom's delicious pound cake. But instead of being in the cafeteria, I was in an English class, and I was sitting there, and somewhere between 11 and 11:30, the blackboard became fuzzy. I got really, really sleepy, and I guess I just took a nap. Now, the softer people in the world will say I passed out, but I think I just chose to take an involuntary nap. Well, it created quite a stir in the little high school that I went to. It's very unusual for a highly energetic young person to suddenly stop being highly energetic. And they began to do all kinds of things. They whispered in dark circles about could I have a brain tumor and what was something wrong with my heart. And they poked and they prodded and they tested. And I'm a pretty easygoing, laid-back person, but as a child, it kind of scares you. The death knell came when I was sitting in an afternoon class several weeks later, and Dr. Mally Long, and now she probably wasn't a doctor then, but she was an MIT-educated mathematician who ended up teaching high school in Oxford, Alabama. Her educational woes included having me as a student. My brother was the valedictorian and was quite the mathematical student, and I was not. She had a lot of fun with me in her class, but I remember being in her class, and when things would not happen, she would, Mr. Jones, and oftentimes I would have to go to the board and do things, and she would make a public example of you and humiliate you and embarrass you. She was my favorite teacher. In fact, after I earned my master's degree, and earning a master's degree in counseling psychology involves behavioral and inferential statistics. And for some odd reason, the things that Mally Long had hammered into my head in high school that had not translated into high school, they showed up in my mind in this mathematics statistics class. And I made a decent grade. In fact, I made a good grade in the class. And upon completing that class with better grades than I made in high school, I looked up her number and called her. And I called her in Oxford, Alabama, and asked, could I speak to Dr. Long? And she says, this is she. And I said, well, this is Lonnie Jones. And she said, the Lonnie Jones? And I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, and what correctional institution are we dialing from? As long as I'm not in prison, I just finished my master's degree. So that's the relationship I had with this teacher. what she thought about me. And I'm sitting in her class zoned out because I'm preoccupied as to what's wrong with me. Why do I keep passing out between 11 and 11:30? Why do I keep having these spells? What is happening to my mood and my attitude? And she called on me in the middle of one of my reveries, and she startled me into existence. And I was getting ready for the hammer to fall. And she says, never mind. And she moved to another student and she left me there. She didn't call on me. She didn't bring me to the board and make me do 9 problems in front of the class and heckle me while I tried. She just let me off the hook. That's when I knew I was terminal. That's when I knew I was probably dying, and they just didn't want to tell me yet. Well, as it turns out, an old ear, nose, and throat doctor in Anniston, Alabama, wanted to give me a glucose tolerance test. And they hospitalized me after they'd done all kinds of things, and he gave me this little glucose tolerance test, and it ends up that my blood sugar ended up being on the low end of normal. Now, low end of normal can't be described in a medical form for the coding purposes, so it was labeled hypoglycemia. And that's what my mother heard, that I am hypoglycemic. And the doctor said, well, here's how we're going to modify his diet, and here's what we're going to do. And it basically became an almost sugar-free, high-protein diet, 6 small meals a day. Now, this had some advantages in that as an emerging 9th grader, I was very interested in working out. My workout routine involved push-ups of various kinds and forms and an all-protein diet almost. And so combining the protein with the workout, I monstered up as monstrous as you can get at 5 foot even and 145 pounds, but I was a stellar physical specimen. And I carried this little blood sugar secret with me. Now, the truth is I should control this thing by diet and exercise. I should exercise a lot and eat very, very little sugar, very, very little carbs, and absolutely stay away from bread. But as a college student, you don't always obey those rules, and from time to time, it would catch up with me. Now, if you're eating the wrong things but doing the right things, it's not a big deal. But let me skip breakfast, and then let me supplement, midday snack with an ice cream sandwich or a Snicker bar, and then have me move some heavy furniture or push a car or wrestle somebody. And then all of a sudden I could get into a blood sugar episode, a sugar deficit, and crash. And it's one of those things you just happen to manage when you live by yourself in a dorm. As I got older, began to be in a relationship with Jackie, and then eventually we became husband and wife, she took it upon herself to help me manage my blood sugar. She wanted me to eat differently. She wanted me to eat better. And she would control and still try a large extent to keep me healthy. She's an excellent cook. She knows a lot about nutrition and metabolism. She's a fitness person. And so over the years, we've done things where she's tried to help me be more physically fit. I got to where I was supplementing some of my things that I eat with honey. I love honey. I hate bees, but I love honey. Honeybees are the only animal on the planet that gets a pass on them being a flying, stinging creature because they produce the nectar of the gods. They make honey. I put honey in oatmeal. I put honey on cereal. I put honey on donuts. I put honey in Frosties. I put honey on anything that you'll allow me to put honey in because I like honey. I'm doing pretty good with this blood sugar problem, and I think it's a quasi or a pseudo blood sugar problem because the planets have to align just right for it to really give me a problem. If I'm smart, I just act like I'm sugar-free, but in truth, I do fudge a little bit. Anyway, I'm eating honey at the house out of those little bear-shaped bottles you can buy at Walmart, and Jackie keeps noticing when she thinks I've had honey. And it's like, hey, you've had honey, you're grouchy. You've had honey, you're irritable. Baby, the honey it's a natural sugar. I'd convinced myself, and I could eat the honey and it wouldn't bother me. It was one of those things that I was going to be allowed to have. I can't have donuts. I can't have cookies. I have to drink Diet Cokes. I'm going to have some honey. But according to my honey, the honey I was eating was affecting my mood. So I bought some sugar-free honey. little odd shaped bottle that you find in some kind of little organic place. And as long as I had the sugar free honey, we had no issues at Casa de Jones about my diet. The only problem is honey will run out. And when the sugar free honey ran out, I didn't buy any more. I just kept the bottle. I kept the bottle and would buy my little honey bear from Walmart and transfer the contents of said honey bear into the sugar free bottle. And Mrs. Jones was as happy as a lamb with me in eating the sugar free honey, which it was indeed not sugar free honey. It was just honey in a sugar free bottle. Sometimes it's all about the packaging. Men don't wear perfume, we wear cologne. Men don't play with dolls, we had action figures. So I've got honey in a sugar free jar, and it seems to make everybody happy. Well, on some occasion somewhere, we're having a family discussion. Lonnie Beth is there. Jackie is there. I'm there. Lonnie Beth has done something that we don't agree with, and there's a little bit of cloud of deception around it. And I called her integrity into question. And I said, I'm not sure that that's really being honest. And to which she responded, honest? You want to talk about honest? You got little honey bears buried in the backyard like a serial killer. And thus the jig was up, and my honey train came to a screeching halt. A honey bear serial killer. That's not a very intimidating name. I mean, it's not like the Night Stalker or the Strangler of some version. And really, the honey bears weren't killed. The truth was the only thing that was murdered. Yeah. You see, when you do things you shouldn't do, you can make up all kind of excuses for it, and the first thing you have to do is lie about it. You got to lie to yourself. You got to lie about what truth really is. And at some point, you end up convincing yourself that it's okay to omit information, and deception by omission is still deception. Yeah, I'm not supposed to eat that kind of sugar. I'm not supposed to have it. Now, the problem I have with that is, who gives somebody the right to tell me what I can and can't have? You see, I was born liking honey. My body needs proteins, carbohydrates, sugar. I come from the factory with a need for this thing, but a doctor can look at me and say, your need for this particular version of that is dysfunctional. It's destructive. It's damaging. It keeps you from performing optimally. In fact, when you do this to your body, you perform suboptimally. My doctor's not judgmental. My doctor is not sugar phobic. My doctor is not a food phobic. My doctor doesn't hate me. My doctor's not trying to rob me of quality of life. My doctor's not preventing me from my civil rights. My doctor's not keeping me from living in an equal society. My doctor is not in some way, shape, or form not being just to me. My doctor says there are some things that if you use them in this way and put them into your body, damages your body. I don't know how we are okay with the medical community doing that, but we're not okay with the religious community doing that. You see, there are things in Christianity that are counterintuitive. You see, I come from the factory with certain needs, wants, and desires. And God says there's a healthy and unhealthy way to express those. If you do it this way, it's suboptimal. If you participate in it prematurely, it's damaging, it's dysfunctional. It creates all kinds of difficulties. I don't know how we're okay with there being things that we call quote unquote medical sin. There's certain things you shouldn't ingest. You should ingest certain things only in certain amounts. There's some things that some people can have and some things that other people can't have the same thing. And yet nobody starts talking about doctors being judging or phobic or condemning or, you see, when you start talking about morals or you talk about sin, everything that God has ever forbidden us to do, whether it's an expression of our anger, an expression of our covetousness, or expression of our sexuality, if God says there's a limit on this, it's to prevent us from damaging ourselves emotionally, physically, psychologically, and ultimately spiritually. But those rules are never just arbitrary. Those things are designed to communicate health and well-being for us physically, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. And just because we don't like it, and just because we don't see it that way, just because we disagree with it, doesn't give us the right to accuse God of being unloving or uncaring, or even to respond to people who say these things are taught, these things are known, these things are commanded. You see, it's okay to have medical restrictions, but no, wait a minute. The medical restrictions the doctor put on me, I naturally want these things. But just because I'm born with a natural desire for it doesn't mean it's permissible. And I don't necessarily fall into the category that we are born a certain way. I don't necessarily fall into the category of the discussion that believes that the development of the person does not have something to do with environment and even trauma. I don't believe there's a genetic marker for those things that are under debate in some of our circles. But just granting the fact, just assuming that premise holds solid. Okay, so I was born with this natural tendency. Well, even if you were, is it healthy? See, I was born to like sugar. My body craves its sugar. My body wants sugar. But if I put sugar into my body, it's poison. Now, that's not unloving. That's not uncaring. That's not unkind. That's just truth. And if I don't want to lose my eyesight and my limbs and don't want to develop neuropathy, then I live by those restrictions. Now, I can come up with all kind of reasons about what I deserve and what I want and how unfair it is and how you're allowed to do that, but I'm not, and how dare you look at me and but the bottom line is, when things are considered to be sinful, immoral, another word for that would be damaging, dysfunctional, suboptimal to our lives. And you can talk about the people who tell you the truth about it in any kind of disparaging term you want, and you can relabel it as anything you want. But the bottom line is that if I'm not supposed to have honey, I'm not supposed to have honey. And it doesn't matter what the label on the bottle says. If I'm not supposed to have it, I should probably stay away from it. Call it what you want to. Label it in any way you want to label it. Package it in any way that seems to make it more palatable or more allowable. But the bottom line is that the things that are damaging to us physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, those things have consequences. And just because we don't agree with it, just because we don't like the cause and effect, just because it seems unfair that there's a restriction on us because of X, Y, or Z. And that doesn't matter if it's an expression of your covetousness or your temper or your envy or anything else. If you put the contents of sin into a bottle and label it sin-free, the packaging doesn't change the fact that it'll hurt you. The packaging doesn't change the fact that it has negative consequences just because the package says this. It's really about what's on the inside. And just because you eat it from a sugar-free package doesn't mean you can have the sugar for free. There are 32 miles of cave passages in Cumberland Cavern. 333 feet underground is the Volcano Room. The Volcano Room is the site for the youth rally known as Erupt. It's an underground youth rally. It's an annual event. It takes place in October. The next Erupt is scheduled for October of 2021. Erupt is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. If you'd like more information, you may contact them at eruptyouthRally@gmail.com. That's eruptyouthRally@gmail.com. Or check out their website for more information, 3 W's and a dot, eruptyouthRally.com, www.eruptyouthRally.com. This year, on June 20th, we're going to launch a special edition of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. It'll be a special anthology called The Dad Files. It's 52 very short, very brief discussions of some of the things that I wrote about and the things I learned just being a dad. I found all the old articles that I wrote about Lonnie Beth, from the time that we found out she was coming into the world to a few things that I wrote about in being a grandfather and being able to play with her children. We'll be launching this in small blocks. The whole thing will come out at one time, but they'll be in sections. I think maybe the longest one might be 7 or 8 minutes long, but it would give you a weekly look at some daily dad devotionals, or maybe even just some things that are linked to being a parent, some observations from my life as a young father all the way up to being a grandfather, and invite you, if you're interested in some extra bonus material, check us out when we launch the Dad Files on Father's Day. Should you be interested in sponsoring the Dad Files, you can email me, lonjones, LONJONES, @bellsouth.net, or just send me a message on Facebook. And if you're interested in sponsoring the Dad Files, we'll talk about what that involves. And again, we thank you for keeping up with Jones.